What if the reason a man loves you has almost nothing to do with you, and everything to do with his own unconscious mind? According to legendary psychologist Carl Jung, love isn't just about attraction or compatibility. It's a powerful psychological mirror, reflecting the deepest, often hidden parts of a man's psyche. And once you understand how this works, you'll see love and his feelings for you in a completely new way. Carl Jung, the groundbreaking thinker behind concepts like the collective unconscious and archetypes, revealed that love is far more than surface-level chemistry. At its core, it's about projection, the search for wholeness, and the invisible forces that draw two people together. Jung believed that when a man falls in love, he isn't just seeing you, he's seeing parts of himself he may not even recognize. His anima, his inner feminine ideal, his shadow, the traits he represses, and even his unmet desires all shape who he loves and why. So if you've ever wondered why some connections feel faded while others fade, the answer lies in Jung's theory of the unconscious. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how it works. At the heart of Carl Jung's theory of love lies a profound psychological truth. We don't fall in love with other people so much as we fall in love with the hidden parts of ourselves that we see reflected in them. This is the mystery of the Anima and Animus, perhaps Jung's most revolutionary contribution to understanding romantic attraction. The Anima represents a man's inner feminine dimension, not just a collection of traits, but an entire unconscious personality that shapes his deepest experiences of love, creativity, and connection. Similarly, the Animus constitutes a woman's inner masculine counterpart. These aren't literal gender identities, but rather archetypal energies that exist within all of us, regardless of biological sex. When a man encounters a woman who embodies qualities that resonate with his unconscious anima image, something remarkable happens in his psyche. It's as if a dormant part of himself suddenly awakens, creating that unmistakable feeling of being struck by love. This explains why attraction often feels so irrational and overpowering. We're not just responding to another person, but to the symbolic representation of our own unconscious completeness. A man might find himself inexplicably drawn to a woman's nurturing warmth, not simply because it's pleasant, but because it mirrors the comforting feminine energy he may have experienced with his mother or other early caregivers, now internalized as part of his anima. The anima projection becomes particularly fascinating when we consider how it shapes men's romantic preferences across cultures and lifetimes. A man raised by a highly intellectual mother might unconsciously seek partners who stimulate him mentally, while one whose primary feminine influence was artistic may be perpetually drawn to creative women. This explains why two men can look at the same woman and have completely different reactions. One might feel instant chemistry while another remains indifferent. It's not about objective beauty or worth, but about how well she matches each man's unique anima blueprint. This dynamic also helps explain the phenomenon of love at first sight. When a man meets someone who perfectly embodies his anima image, the experience can feel faded or magical because it represents a sudden, powerful connection with his own unconscious. The woman becomes a living symbol of everything he's been missing psychologically. This is why these intense attractions often have a mythical, larger-than-life quality. We're not just seeing another person, but the embodiment of an archetype that's lived in our collective unconscious for millennia. However, Jung warned that this initial stage of projection is just the beginning of the journey. The woman who perfectly matches a man's anima image isn't necessarily his ideal life partner. She's the ideal mirror for his psychological development. As the relationship progresses, reality inevitably intrudes on the fantasy. The goddess-like figure he first perceived gradually reveals herself to be human, with flaws and complexities that don't align with his projection. This moment of disillusionment, while painful, represents a crucial opportunity for growth. The healthiest relationships occur when both partners can withdraw their projections and see each other as real, separate individuals. For the man, this means recognizing that the qualities he admires in his partner aren't just traits she possesses, but aspects of himself he needs to develop. The nurturing warmth he loves in her might indicate his own need to cultivate more self-care. The creativity that fascinates him might point to artistic impulses he's neglected. In this way, love becomes a path to wholeness, not through possession of another, but through integration of the self. This explains why some men seem to have a type they're consistently attracted to throughout their lives. They're not just seeking similar partners, they're repeatedly encountering different manifestations of their anima image. Each relationship offers another opportunity to better understand and integrate their inner feminine. The woman who embodies mystery might help him connect with his own intuition. The passionate partner might awaken his emotional depth. Even failed relationships serve this developmental purpose, each one revealing another layer of his unconscious self. Ultimately, Jung's concept of the anima transforms how we understand love's purpose. Romantic attraction isn't just about reproduction or companionship, it's a profound psychological mechanism for growth and self-discovery. When a man looks at the woman he loves, he's not just seeing her, he's glimpsing the unclaimed territories of his own soul. And in that recognition lies love's greatest gift, the chance to become more complete. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow is one of his most fascinating and unsettling ideas. It represents the parts of ourselves we deny, suppress, or deem unacceptable, often buried deep in the unconscious. Yet, far from disappearing, these rejected traits continue to shape our lives in powerful ways, especially in love. When a man falls for you, it's not always because of your shared interests or even your kindness. Sometimes, it's because you unconsciously embody the very qualities he has spent his life avoiding in himself. You become the living expression of what he has hidden away, and that can be irresistibly compelling. Think of the quiet, composed man who is drawn to a fiery, outspoken woman. On the surface, it might seem like opposites attracting, but Jung would argue there's something far deeper at play. Her boldness and emotional intensity aren't just different from his nature, they're the traits he has likely been taught to suppress. Maybe he was raised to believe that men shouldn't be too emotional or that strength means never showing vulnerability. So when he encounters a woman who freely expresses passion, stands her ground, or wears her heart on her sleeve, he isn't just fascinated by her, he's unconsciously drawn to the disowned parts of himself. In loving her, he gets to experience, through her, what he has never allowed himself to be. This dynamic isn't always smooth, of course. The shadow carries a magnetic pull, but it can also create tension. The same qualities that initially captivate him might later frustrate or even threaten him, because they force him to confront what he has spent years avoiding. If he has spent his life believing that vulnerability is weakness, your emotional openness might eventually trigger resistance in him. He may oscillate between adoring your freedom and resenting it, because it reflects back to him everything he has denied in himself. This is why some of the most intense relationships are also the most turbulent. The shadow doesn't just attract, it provokes. Yet, if both partners are willing to explore this dynamic consciously, it can become a path to profound growth. Love, in the Jungian sense, isn't just about comfort or harmony, it's about wholeness. When a man begins to recognize that his attraction to you is partly a reflection of his own repressed self, he has the opportunity to reclaim those lost parts. Instead of merely admiring your strength, he might learn to embrace his own. Instead of being captivated by your emotional depth, he might start to acknowledge his own feelings. In this way, love becomes more than just a bond between two people. It becomes a mirror, a teacher, and ultimately, a way back to the self. This is why Jung believed that relationships are one of the most powerful catalysts for personal transformation. The things we love, and the things that challenge us, in another person are often the very things we need to confront within ourselves. So the next time you wonder why a man is drawn to you, consider this. It might not just be about who you are, but about who he hasn't yet allowed himself to become. And that realization changes everything. At the core of Jungian psychology lies a radical truth about love: our most powerful relationships aren't meant to make us happy, but to make us whole. This process of psychological integration, what Jung called individuation, reveals that every deep romantic connection serves as a mirror reflecting back the fragmented parts of ourselves we've yet to acknowledge. When a man loves you intensely, it's often because you embody qualities that represent the next stage of his psychological evolution. You become the living symbol of what he must embrace within himself to achieve true self-realization. This explains why the right relationship at the right time can feel like destiny, because in a psychological sense, it is. The journey toward individuation through love follows a distinct arc. Initially, a man projects his unconscious ideal onto you, seeing you not as you truly are, but as the embodiment of his anima, that inner feminine essence he's been carrying unknowingly. This projection creates the intoxicating rush of new love, where everything about you seems magical and perfect. But as the relationship deepens, reality inevitably intrudes. The goddess he imagined you to be turns out to be human, with flaws and complexities that don't match his projection. This moment of disillusionment, while painful, marks the beginning of real growth. Now he faces a choice: either withdraw the projection and see you as you truly are, or cling to the fantasy and remain stuck in psychological immaturity. Healthy love occurs when both partners use this disillusionment as fuel for transformation. The qualities he initially adored in you, perhaps your emotional expressiveness, your creative spirit, or your fierce independence, were never just about you. They represented aspects of himself he needed to develop. Your emotional openness might push him to confront his own repressed feelings. Your creative energy might inspire him to explore long-neglected talents. Your strength might challenge him to stand up for himself in new ways. In this context, conflicts become opportunities rather than threats, each disagreement highlighting another area where growth is needed. However, this process can easily go awry when projections remain unconscious. Toxic relationships often feature what Jung called sticky projections, where a man refuses to see you as separate from his anima fantasy. He may demand you maintain the perfect image he's created, punishing you when you deviate from it. This explains why some men become controlling or resentful when their partners show independence or change. They're not reacting to you as a person, but fighting against the collapse of their projection. Similarly, when a man idealizes you beyond reason, putting you on an impossible pedestal, it's often a sign he's avoiding his own development by making you solely responsible for carrying his feminine energy. The individuation process through love becomes particularly evident in midlife, when many men experience what Jung termed the second half of life crisis. Relationships that once felt satisfying may suddenly seem empty because they no longer serve his psychological growth. A man who spent his early years focused on achievement might find himself drawn to artistic or spiritual partners, signaling his need to develop those neglected aspects. This isn't about being dissatisfied with his partner, but about his psyche demanding new dimensions of wholeness. The healthiest couples navigate this transition together, using the relationship as a crucible for mutual transformation rather than allowing it to become stagnant. Ultimately, individuation teaches us that true love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone perfectly suited to help us become whole. The right partner doesn't complete us, they reveal to us where we're incomplete. When a man loves you in this Jungian sense, he's not just loving you for who you are, but for who you inspire him to become. And this is perhaps love's greatest paradox. The more we use relationships to confront our own fragmentation, the more capable we become of genuine connection. Not as two halves seeking completion, but as two whole beings choosing to walk the path of growth together. This perspective transforms how we understand relationship challenges. Every conflict, every moment of friction, becomes potential grist for the mill of self-discovery. The traits in you that frustrate him likely point to disowned parts of himself. The ways he disappoints you may reflect areas where he still needs to grow. In this light, love becomes less about happiness and more about truth, the truth of who we are, who we're becoming, and what we still need to integrate. The healthiest relationships are those where both partners consciously participate in this alchemical process, using their bond not as an escape from themselves, but as a mirror for their continued evolution. Jung's insight reveals that we're always loving at two levels simultaneously, the personal and the archetypal. On the surface, it's about two unique individuals connecting. But at a deeper level, it's about the psyche's eternal journey toward wholeness. When a man loves you in a way that feels transformative, it's because he's not just encountering you, he's encountering himself through you. And this is why such love can feel both profoundly personal and mysteriously universal, as if you're participating in a pattern much larger than yourselves. In the end, we don't find wholeness through love, we find love through wholeness. And that makes all the difference. The notion of a soulmate has enchanted lovers for centuries. The idea that somewhere out there exists one perfect person divinely destined for us, a missing puzzle piece who will make us whole. But Jung's psychological perspective shatters this romantic fantasy with a far more profound truth. What we call soulmate connections have less to do with cosmic fate and everything to do with unconscious psychological fit. That electric feeling of recognition, the sense of having known someone forever, the mysterious pull towards certain people, these aren't signs of preordained love, but evidence of powerful archetypal resonances within our psyches. The person who feels like a soulmate is typically someone who perfectly matches our inner anima or animus image at a particular stage of our development, creating that uncanny sensation of meeting a stranger yet feeling like you've come home. This psychological understanding liberates us from the tyranny of the soulmate myth, which too often leads to unrealistic expectations and perpetual dissatisfaction. Jung observed that when people believe in destined, perfect love, they tend to make one of two mistakes. Either they endlessly search for an impossible ideal, discarding real relationships because they don't match some fantasy, or they burden their partner with the expectation to be everything for them: lover, therapist, best friend, and spiritual guide. Both approaches inevitably lead to disappointment because no human being can fulfill such archetypal roles indefinitely. The soulmate fantasy, while intoxicating, sets relationships up for failure by confusing psychological projection with lasting love. The reality is more complex yet ultimately more rewarding. Those relationships we instinctively call soul connections are indeed special, but not because they're perfect. They're special because they act as powerful mirrors, showing us exactly what we need to see about ourselves at that moment in our growth. A man might meet a woman who feels like his soulmate because her fiery temperament perfectly balances his reserve, forcing him to confront his repressed passion. Years later, he might encounter another soulmate whose quiet wisdom helps him integrate his spirituality. Each connection serves a different developmental purpose, which is why the idea of one eternal soulmate is psychologically limiting. We need different mirrors at different stages of our lives. This perspective transforms how we approach lasting love. Rather than searching for someone who fits some predetermined mold, we become curious about why we're drawn to certain people. What unconscious parts of ourselves do they reflect? What hidden aspects are we trying to reclaim through this attraction? A man consistently drawn to emotionally unavailable women, for instance, might be reenacting childhood patterns with a distant parent. Another who idealizes nurturing partners might be compensating for his own lack of self-care. The key isn't finding the right person, but developing the awareness to see these patterns clearly and use them for growth. Practical love in the Jungian sense requires what he called withdrawing projections, the difficult work of recognizing that the qualities we admire or despise in our partner often belong to us. When a man falls head over heels because a woman embodies his ideal of creativity, he must eventually realize that his intense attraction signals his own need to develop creative expression. Similarly, traits that irritate him, perhaps her unpredictability or strong opinions, likely point to aspects of himself he's disowned. This doesn't mean tolerating poor treatment, but understanding that our strongest reactions always contain valuable psychological information. The healthiest relationships occur when both partners engage in this conscious dance of projection and reclamation. They appreciate the initial magic of feeling like soulmates, but don't cling to it as a permanent state. Instead, they use that energy as fuel for mutual growth, gradually replacing fantasy with genuine understanding. They recognize that the work of love isn't about maintaining some perfect harmony, but about navigating the inevitable clashes between reality and projection with honesty and compassion. In this way, what begins as an unconscious fit can mature into something far more rare and precious. A conscious partnership where two people choose each other not because they're perfect mirrors, but because they've learned to love both the reflections and the real human beings behind them. Ultimately, Jung's view offers a more sustainable path to lasting love than the soulmate myth ever could. It acknowledges the mystery and magnetism of certain connections while grounding them in psychological reality. The most enduring relationships aren't those where two people find their other half, but where two whole people continually choose to grow together, not because destiny decreed it, but because they've done the hard work of seeing and accepting each other's full humanity. In the end, that's far more magical than any fantasy of predestined perfection. What we call love is far more than an emotion. It's a profound psychological dialogue between two unconscious worlds. As we've explored, a man's love for you isn't merely about your qualities, but about how those qualities resonate with the hidden chambers of his psyche. You are both the mirror and the catalyst, reflecting back the disowned parts of himself while simultaneously inviting him to grow. This is why love can feel so mysteriously fated, yet also requires such conscious work. The initial spark comes from unconscious recognition, but lasting connection demands that both of you awaken to these deeper dynamics at play. This understanding changes everything about how we approach relationships. Rather than wondering, does he love me? The more transformative question becomes, what part of himself does he see or avoid through me? When you recognize that his strongest attractions and resistances are clues to his inner world, you gain the power to navigate love with wisdom rather than wishful thinking. The same applies to your own feelings. Your intense attractions likely point to your own unmet potentials waiting to be claimed. This is how love becomes a path not just to partnership, but to wholeness. Now we'd love to hear from you. Have you noticed these Jungian patterns in your own relationships? Perhaps you've been the expressive woman who drew a reserved man, or recognized how a partner's soulmate intensity faded as projections lifted. Share your experiences in the comments. What unconscious dynamics have you uncovered in your journey of love? Your story might help others see their relationships in a profound new light. And if this perspective resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more insights that bridge psychology and the heart. Remember, the deepest love isn't found. It's created one conscious reflection at a time.